Okay, the first type of senses that we're going to deal with are going to be the general senses. But let me give you some background information first about this whole idea of sensory receptors and sensory neurons a little bit more in general. As you can see, this unit is going to be very closely tied with the nervous system that we just finished. But to put this all together in one unit was going to be way, way too much information. So a sensory receptor is defined as a specialized cell or cell part that detects either internal or external changes. So it can be an entire cell, or it can be something as simple as like the dendrites on a neuron embedded in a particular area that get triggered. Okay, so like I said, these can be very simple, like free nerve endings, the dendrites of sensory neurons, or they can be very complex and highly specialized, like the visual receptors of the eye. These look very, very different from cells elsewhere, and they are specialized to respond to light and only light. They don't respond to sound, they don't respond to heat. Now, when you hear about receptors, we often also talk about a receptive field. A receptive field is an area that is monitored by a single receptor cell. So, in other words, if you think about, put two fingers on your arm, and at some point it's going to get so far apart that you actually feel two touches versus one. The size of a receptor field is going to determine how fine of differences we can tell. Okay, the larger the receptive field, the lower the precision. And we have certain areas of our body that have very small receptive fields, like on the tips of our fingers. And then we have areas that don't need to be that specialized and feel that detailed of change, like for instance on our legs. Those receptive fields are much, much larger. And that's actually one of the things that we're going to be testing in the lab that we do next week, is size of the receptive field. So how do our senses actually function in terms of generalities? Well, it functions very much just like the nervous system. We have some sort of stimulus, and that stimulus is going to trigger an action potential within the sensory neurons, and that action potential travels to our central nervous system. We call this arriving information, which includes things like the strength of the stimulus, the type of stimulus that it is, where it is, all those types of things, taken collectively, is referred to a sensation. The information from the sensation is routed to a specific brain center for processing. Now, it's not any one brain center. Sometimes it can be several that are involved. Now, if this sensation is one that we need to pay attention to, we will notice it. And once we notice it, it goes from being a sensation to a perception. We go through lots of different sensations in the day. For instance, you are sitting there right now and you're probably not aware that the clothes are actually touching your skin. Your brain is actually filtering those sensations out. Now that you're thinking of it, you may actually feel that, and so now it is becoming a perception. Now, using the clothing again as an example, wearing clothes and having it touch your skin is an example of adaptation, where we have decreased sensitivity to a constant stimulus. So, the first time you may wear a new pair of shoes or a particular item of clothing, like a shirt, maybe you're not used to the fact that it's got, 3/4 sleeves, and it may seem uncomfortable to you. But after a while, you don't notice it as much. So that's where your body is going through adaptation, or sometimes we refer to that as accommodation. Now we have two basic groups of senses that we're going to be going through. The first one is the one that we're going to deal with mostly in this video, and those are the general senses. And those include things like, and then we have the specialized senses. The general senses include temperature, pain, touch, pressure, vibration, proprioception, which is our orientation in space, and chemicals. Our specialized senses we typically associate with sense organs, and those include olfaction, gustation, vision, equilibrium, and hearing. So what we're going to do first is we are going to deal with the general senses. And if you flip over to the table that's on the next couple of pages in your notes, you'll see I have things kind of laid out for you. Okay. Now I'll kind of guide you because there is some overlap as the sense thing kind of breaks pages here. So I want to make sure that you get your chart filled in correctly and how I intended. So in the first column for that first sense, in that I know it's a big box, but we're going to need the room on the other side, goes the word pain. That's the only thing that you write in that sense box. Now, in the receptor box, the type of receptor that detects pain is called a nociceptor. Then if you move over another column, you'll notice that it's respond to or monitor. So what do these nociceptors respond to, or what kind of things do they monitor? They respond to extreme temperature change. So it's a warm day out, you go and you reach and get a soda out of an ice and water-filled cooler. You actually feel pain by plunging your hand. You know those needles? Yeah, that's pain. So you'll actually feel that pain because those nociceptors get triggered with that extreme temperature change. Mechanical damage, like you go sliding across a turf field, hand slammed in a car door. Okay, mechanical damage, you're actually physically damaging your body. You also have pain triggered as a result of dissolved chemicals that are released by injured cells. That's why, after the initial injury is over, you may have an area that is still painful for a while because those damaged cells are still releasing chemicals that are still triggering the nociceptors for a while. I think the worst ones that do this are paper cuts, right? Because those hurt for a while. Okay, some other information that relates to pain. We can have something called fast pain. Fast pain is actually a very localized pain that you get from something like a cut or an injection. So it's very sharp, it's very localized. That's fast pain. Slow pain is more of a burning or aching sensation that happens over a very broad area. Muscle aches, burns, actually skin burns. Those are, obviously pain, but it's over a broad area, things from a scrape. We also have something called referred pain. This is where you perceive pain in an area that's not actually stimulated. And one of the examples I'm giving you here is the arm for the heart, just because I think most of you are familiar with the symptoms of a heart attack is the shooting pain down the arm. Now, last I checked, I know we haven't covered the system, but I think most of you know that our heart is not located in our arm. Where the pain is actually taking place is in the chest, but we have this referred pain down our arm. There are other areas of referred pain, and there's actually a really nice diagram in your book if you're interested in looking at that, although I'm not holding you responsible for memorizing all of those. It's just one of those things that's kind of neat to know. Okay, our next sense that we have is temperature. Okay, so that goes in the sense box. The receptor that we have are thermoreceptors, and we have two types. We have cold ones and we have warm ones. And obviously what they respond to and monitor are temperature changes. These are one of the types of senses that actually adapts very quickly. So you walk into a room and you're like, oh, it's cold, or oh, it's hot, but you tend to kind of adapt very quickly and you get used to it and you don't notice it anymore. I will tell you we have more cold receptors in our body than warm receptors. And part of that reason, they think it's actually an evolutionary concept because we are warm-blooded animals. We are very susceptible to cold. Cold temperatures can kill us. And so in order to kind of kick on our thermostat, we have more of those cold receptors, so we know to trigger those mechanisms to heat up our body versus cooling down our body. Okay, this next one is kind of, well, it's the one before the tricky one. We have touch, pressure, and position. So that all three of those go in that first box right underneath temperature. The receptors we have in general for all three of these types are called mechanoreceptors. And they respond to or monitor things like stretching, compression, so getting pushed down up from both sides, and twisting. Now what we're going to do is, in the spaces underneath, we are going to go through the three subclasses, both touch, pressure, and position. So we're going to go through these in a little bit more detail. But overall, the receptors for all three of these types, it's kind of a big general class, is called mechanoreceptors. So the next sense that we are using, okay, in that box there goes touch. In the receptor box, you've got a blank box and then letters A and B. This receptor type that I have listed here goes in the blank box. Touch receptors are in general called tactile receptors. And they respond to and monitor, and this goes in the blank box right next to tactile receptors, touch, pressure, and vibration. Now you can move over now and use that big other info box at the end. There are 6 kinds of touch receptors, and that's what we're going to spend our time going through here now. All right. In general, we have 2 major classes. We have fine touch receptors, which provide very detailed information and location information to the body. And we have crude touch receptors, which give us a lot of generalized information, but it's not very detailed. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go back and start filling in under receptor and respond to and monitor for some of the different types of touch receptors. So the one by letter A is free nerve endings. And these respond to or monitor touch and pressure on the skin. The second type, letter B, is the root hair plexus. And these monitor hair movement that we have on the surface of the body. So this is how we can tell things like wind is blowing because it actually moves the hair on our skin. Now when you're done with this, you will actually flip to the next page. And under sense, we are still with touch. So be sure that you fill that in under the sense. Letter C, the name of the receptor is a tactile or Merkel disc. Merkel is the name of the scientist. Again, discover stuff in science, getting stuff named after you. They respond to and monitor fine touch as well as pressure. Now there is other information on this, so if you look over, you've got that little blank box so you can use it. These types of discs are found on hairless skin, like for instance our eyelids and our lips. We also have another type of tactile receptor that's kind of in some of those same areas. But these are called tactile corpuscles or Meissner corpuscles, so the name is slightly different. But again, we're monitoring fine touch, pressure, and vibration. And these are found on our eyelids and our lips, like I mentioned before, as well as our fingertips. There's no hair on our fingertips, the nipples, and the external genitalia. The fifth type of touch receptor are called the lamellated, okay, lamella means layered, or Pacinian corpuscles. So these are corpuscles that have many layers to them. They are responding to things like deep pressure, as well as pulsing and high frequency vibration. Sometimes these are like the pulsing vibrations from a very deep bass that you can actually kind of feel. What you're actually doing is triggering these corpuscles. These are found in areas especially like the fingers, the breasts, the external genitalia, the joint capsules. So sometimes if you're exposed to these types of things, it actually makes your joints hurt, as well as your urinary bladder. Again, you've got pressure in there. The last one are the Ruffini corpuscles, and they monitor pressure or distortion of the skin. And these are buried deep within the dermis. So they can tell, like, when you've gotten very deep pressure, like somebody's really pushing hard on your skin, or your skin is getting twisted very severely. These are those receptors that are activated. The next subcategory, remember we're still in the subcategory of touch, pressure, pain, is going to be position. Next one is pressure, then the following one will be position. The type of receptor that responds to pressure are the baroreceptors. And I kind of remember this because it kind of sounds like barometric pressure, that sort of thing. What do they monitor? They monitor the elastic tissue of our blood vessels because we have a blood pressure. And they also monitor the pressures within our respiratory, digestive, and urinary tracts. Obviously, we have air pressure within our lungs that we need to maintain. Our digestive tract has different pressures that actually build up between the food and the work of the digestive system itself. We actually do get pressure built up in there. And we know that we have fluid pressure within our urinary tract. This is an autonomic regulation, so this is not under our voluntary control or monitoring. The third subtype under touch, pressure, and position then is position. The type of receptors that are present are the proprioceptors, and these respond to or monitor our joints, as well as the tension in the ligaments, and the state of muscular contraction. These actually help monitor how we are positioned in space. Is our head above our feet? When you wake up in the morning, you don't end up disoriented. You know exactly where the floor is, that sort of thing. These sensors are not adaptable, and we can't have them be adaptable because otherwise we would become completely uncoordinated over periods of time. Now, this last row is not a subcategory of the touch, pressure, position one that we just did, and that is chemical. The receptor type are the chemoreceptors, which I think makes a lot of sense. So what chemicals are we trying to monitor? Well, we need to look at the pH as well as the carbon dioxide levels in our cerebrospinal fluid, and the pH, the carbon dioxide, and oxygen levels in our blood. All of those are chemicals. Okay, pH is generated by chemicals, carbon dioxide, as well as oxygen. We need to monitor those. And what happens is, based on the feedback from these receptors, we will actually change both our respiration and our heart rate. Our breathing is one of the ways we actually maintain our body's pH balance, and we'll actually talk about that more when we get to the respiratory system. Obviously, the carbon dioxide and oxygen levels have to do with breathing as well, and then the delivery of that through our heart rate.